All right, welcome to video 2. We left off the last video talking about the evolution of authoritarian governments, and we really focused on the idea of going from less complex to more complex. In addition, what I want us to do is think about them going from single leadership to group leadership to political party and collectivist leadership. The first one we're going to talk about is anarchy. Anarchy, as described by Hobbes, is really just the natural state, the idea of how life would be without any form of government at all. And there are still people today that are anarchists that think the world would be better without any form of government. And Hobbes and Locke would postulate that that's absolutely not true. I'll be honest, I agree. Life would not be better without any form of government because the concern, and this is a philosophical concern, is inherently are all, and we have to say all, are all people good? Because if not all people are inherently good, then we will run into issues. And so in a natural state, we talk about who's in charge. Well, it's everyone. Everyone is in charge of themselves and anyone else that they're willing to take power over. So you're no longer afraid of a government. You're no longer respecting an institution. You are afraid of anyone and everyone, which leads to isolation, which leads to individuals being afraid of being around other individuals. And really what we would have is the breakdown of society. This is a constant struggle then. People are constantly in fear. Can you sleep at night? Seriously, what allows you today to sleep at night without any fear of repercussions, without fear of somebody breaking into your house, taking your property? Constant fear of everyone. Constant fear of your neighbor, of anyone who's bigger and stronger than you. When we talk about the struggle, it's how do you amass wealth? How do you amass a quality of living if you're afraid somebody's going to take it? There is no civilization at this point. And the key to understanding civilization is that we work to improve things if we assume we will be better off for them. Why would you work to improve things when somebody else will just take them from you? So that's our first level of a authoritarian regime. It lives by a simple principle of might makes right, meaning whoever is the strongest is the one in charge. Now, anarchy sucks. Nobody wants to live in it. And so what would happen is we would simply look for protection in whatever form possible, because that is the absolute worst possible form of government. So we work our way up to a dictatorship. Now, a dictatorship is different than an anarchy in there is one person that you are afraid of. There is a single individual that you fear. And so at that point, at least you know who's in charge. And you don't have to worry about somebody else doing something to you that you don't want, because that dictator, that authoritarian ruler, will instill rule and order. Typically, they're a military strongman. You can think about a dictatorship as the schoolyard bully. If society is a playground and there is no teachers, there are no leaders out there, eventually someone will step up and kind of take control. Whether that person is a bully or just someone who kind of makes sure everything goes smoothly is based on their individual morality. These leaders are unrestricted by law, meaning they make the law, and the law doesn't have to apply to them. They can do whatever it is they feel is correct. Whether it's Joseph Stalin, who would move millions of people and tell them where they're going to work, Adolf Hitler, who would systematically murder people in Nazi Germany, or any other number of dictators who violate the laws they themselves prescribe. Citizens have no rights. When we say that, what we mean is you have no right to get married. You have no right to have children. You have no right to get a job that you want. You have no right to live where you want. The dictator can dictate everything that you want, can dictate every part and every facet of society. Key term here, you'll notice I have this bold and italicized. That's something you should make sure you understand then. There is no hereditary succession. Hereditary meaning that it's within a family. It's something you inherit from previous generations. And succession means taking over rule. So the children do not become the next rulers. So when the dictator dies, how do we know who takes over? Well, it's the next strongman. And you can see that this leads to a lot of problems, because if the dictator leaves, there's a power vacuum. What I mean by leave is they die, they abdicate, or somebody overthrows them. During this period between rulers, we will devolve back into the natural state. And so it will become terrible again. So we can see an inherent problem in the dictatorship. So we come up with a solution, which is an absolute monarchy. And we're going to talk about two different types of monarchy here. The first one is absolute monarchy. This is ruled by a royal family. Now, if we're honest, the royal family was originally a dictatorship. They were the strong man. They came in with military power and conquered the people around them and said, I am in charge. And people agreed. Why? Because death is a bad alternative. Now, what they then did to get rid of this question, this pesky, troubling, how do we figure out who's going to have power next? What they did is they installed hereditary succession. So their children become the next rulers. Now that doesn't guarantee that the next ruler will be as benevolent, will be as thoughtful, will be as good as the original king. Well, that's assuming the original king was good, which it might not be. But what it does do is it gets rid of any confusion over who's going to take over next. These children are then born and raised to govern. They're much more highly educated than the general population. They are taught to rule. They are taught how to read, how to deal with finance, all of these things that then should make them a better ruler. And so the citizens, the general population, should in theory be better off because of them. The ruler has almost unlimited power. Almost, because guess what? If there's one child who's in line to become king, if the first king is bad, we could always try and get rid of the first king as long as we have another heir. Now, that means that the citizens have almost no rights. So we can see, hey, this is a little better than a dictatorship. But if you get a bad king, in all honesty, there's no difference between this and a dictatorship. Now, from there we move to a totalitarian state. The key word here, the Latin root, is total, and that's what we should think of. We have absolute rule, but it is not an individual. It is the state. And that is a much, much scarier proposition, because the state is the government. And the government then controls all of your life, every facet. In communist China, they had rules. It said you could only have one child, and if you had more than one child, there were huge social consequences and economic consequences to that. And the bigger concern is this: the state never dies, not of its own. So it's not like the state has a lifespan, it dies, and then you get a new state. The only way to get rid of this is revolution. There are no limits to their authority. Who you marry, where you live, what job you have. Again, think about other countries where you take a test at a certain age. If you fail that test, you are done. You do not continue in education. So this is the level of authority they have. If you think back to 2 Million Minutes, we watched the Chinese boy and the parents talking about what job the government will give him, what concerns they have about which job they choose for him. They regulate, which means passes laws, for every aspect of public and private life. So not just your political life, not just your economic life, but your personal private life is regulated by the government. Individual citizens, therefore, have no power to make decisions. Not everyone is allowed potentially to be part of the government. So you have citizens who are empowered to make decisions if they are loyal to the government, and then other people who are subjected. Individuals have no rights. And lastly, we want to talk about two different types of totalitarian governments. Okay, we look on the left, we have communism, and we say on the left because economically they are far more on the left than fascists. There are huge consequences in history. One of the interesting conversations to have is about World War II, dealing with communist Russia and fascist Germany. And communist Russia did not understand that fascist Germans did not think of them as similar. So we have our questions. Politics. In both, there is a single political party that rules. Economics. This is the major breaking point. First, it looks the same. Hey, the government controls the economy. All right, they seem like the same now. So what's the difference? In a communist government, the government owns all the factors of production. You don't own your house. You don't own your labor. You don't own anything. The government owns it and delegates it to people. Think of it like rationing. In a fascist government, the private citizens still own the factors of production. But the fascist government dictates who wins and who loses. They will tell the company what to produce, but they're still run by private citizens. All right, their ideology, what they think. In a communist government, the individual is secondary to the group. There is a Chinese proverb that says it is the tallest blade of grass that is cut down first. So you must adhere loyally to the group. In fascism, they focus on conflict. It is the individual that makes things great. And those that fail, it is their fault. War weeds out the weak. So they need some kind of struggle and conflict. All right, tomorrow we will start talking about democracy.